Hey! Hi! How you doing? This is the Gamertron, and welcome back to the Gamertron Show. A long time ago, I got a comment on a video, a question from a gamer who doesn't play first-person shooter video games. They told me they didn't understand the appeal of first-person shooter video games and asked me why I liked them so much. I replied with, "That's such a good question, I'm gonna make a video on that." And now a long time has passed, and it's about time I lived up to that promise. Because I find that to be a very interesting question and discussion, don't you think? From one gamer to another who isn't invested in the same video game genres as one another, how do you best describe, how do you best explain why you enjoy the video game genres that you do? What are the real reasons? What are your personal reasons for liking specific kinds of video games? Have you ever asked yourself that? But for now, in this video, I want to explain, from a gamer who loves first-person shooter video games, I want to explain to gamers who aren't invested in this genre, who don't understand this genre, why myself and so many others love first-person shooter video games. And I believe I've come up with 3 understandable reasons as to why this genre is as popular and beloved as it is. So, let's get into it. Reason number 1, guns, weapons, firearms, the shooty bang bangs. Despite all the controversy and moral outrage around guns in the real world, most people, even the people that don't really like guns, can admit guns are cool. They're a complex and intricate tool. Artists, pop culture, the general public are enamored by guns. And I'm not gonna lie, personally, I would like to fire a firearm someday. Most likely, of course, at a shooting range. Problem with that is, that's mighty expensive. The whole license and registration process, getting a membership at a gun range, owning a gun. Guns are an expensive hobby. And in comparison, video games are a much cheaper hobby. While of course firing a gun, using a gun in a video game is nowhere near the real thing. It is, however, a fantastical, simulated, over-the-top taste of what the real thing can provide. If executed properly well, of course. That feeling of adrenaline, of power, of holding what is essentially a bite-sized handheld cannon. And thanks to the actual first-person perspective of, well, a first-person shooter, which we will get into later on, but the first-person perspective allows you to have a more intimate view and relationship with your weapons. The simple change of perspective, from going to a top-down isometric view to a third-person perspective to a first-person view, allows the player experience to be far more personal. You're no longer just watching a character on screen shoot a gun, you yourself are shooting the gun. And up close and personal, you get to see the intricacies of these weapons. All the different connected mechanisms working in sync with one another. Seeing the muzzle flash up close like a miniature explosion in your hands. And of course, depending on the first-person shooter, the detail and ingenuity of the reload animations for all these different guns. Now, depending on the first-person shooter video game, some of these elements are going to be more emphasized than others. Some first-person shooters emphasize the sound and look of the weapons. Others, the accuracy to their real-life counterparts. Some first-person shooters focus more on the projectiles fired by these weapons than the actual details of the weapons themselves. A criticism I often see of the first-person shooter genre by gamers who aren't invested in it is that the genre looks repetitive. But if you've played one, you've seen one, you've played and seen them all. But one of the biggest aspects and features that separates one first-person shooter to another, and you're only going to feel this and see this and experience this if you play a variety of first-person shooters, is the weapons, the guns. They are genuinely different in many ways from one another game to game. An outsider looking in may see an assault rifle or a shotgun in one first-person shooter, see it in another game and think it's identical at first glance, but there are so many more intricacies to building weapons, playing with guns in first-person shooters. You have details and functionalities to consider, such as recoil, magazine size, reload speed, whether or not you actually reload the guns at all depending on the game. Are the weapons projectile or hit scan? What's the range? What's the accuracy? Depending on the game, does the weight of the weapon affect your movement speed? But the most important aspect to consider, what is the subgenre of the game? Yes, the video game is a first-person shooter, But is it a realistic military game? Is it a sci-fi fantasy game? Because that's when you can get crazy and interesting with your guns in a first-person shooter. Some first-person shooters let you use ranged and melee weapons. Some first-person shooters give you fantastical sci-fi guns, lasers, bows and arrows, flamethrowers, rocket launchers of course, beam weapons, automatic weapons, semi-automatic. Do they have AoE spread effects? There is so much to consider. And that's why us fans of first-person shooter games are able to play one after the other and feel like we're having a genuinely new and different experience. Don't get me wrong, I understand. Outsider looking in, all the guns look the same. You aim at the enemy, you point and click at the enemy, you shoot at the enemy, they die. But actually getting a hold of all the different weapons in different first-person shooter video games and playing with them, learning them, experiencing them for yourself, you notice all the different mechanics and intricacies that separate one gun in this first-person shooter video game to a completely different one in another. As someone who loves the first-person shooter genre, it's always exciting to pick up a new first-person shooter, pick up a brand new gun, and test it out, see what it can do, and see how it feels. Now, for reason number 2. Immersive action. It's remarkable how much of a perspective changes, well, your perspective on a video game. No duh, I know. I think this reason obviously explains itself. The first-person perspective allows for much easier immersion. Instead of seeing your character from above with a top-down view or at their back from a third-person view, actually seeing what the in-game avatar sees through their eyes makes it much easier for that part of your brain to forget, yeah, I'm playing a video game, yeah, this is a character in a video game, and instead mislead it, trick it into believing that this is your perspective, you're seeing this. You are in the game. That explosion that just happened, that wasn't right next to your character, that was right next to you. The first-person perspective makes the danger feel more real, and it makes the action and the violence all the more personal, all the more intense, and all the more satisfying to pull off. Because the first-person perspective makes it much easier to believe, for your brain to believe, that it wasn't a video game character that pulled off that badass stunt. It was you that just pulled off and looked like a badass, felt like a badass in that video game, in that moment. Just to provide some real-life examples to give you guys a better idea of what I'm getting at here. Of course, personal preference does come into play, but ask yourself this. What's more satisfying, watching someone else throw darts at a dartboard and hit the bullseye, or when you're throwing darts at a dartboard and you hit the bullseye? Is it more satisfying to watch someone else punch a punching bag, or is it more satisfying when you're punching the punching bag? Think about a sport you play or an exercise that you do. Is it not more satisfying when you are seeing yourself and feeling yourself performing those actions with your own eyes? Now apply that to how first-person shooter gamers feel when they play a video game in the first person, when they play first-person shooters. I hope everything I just said made some sort of sense. And now finally we come to reason number 3. Diversity of skill range. You see, certain video game genres suffer a divide between casual and hardcore gamers. I believe it's a fair statement to make that a specific genre like strategy games, whether it's real-time strategy or turn-based strategy, appeals more to the hardcore gamer than the casual gamer, and the casual gamer may find these games difficult to break into. You can't just pick up and play a real-time strategy game or turn-based strategy game. It takes practice, skill, and knowledge. Whereas another video game genre like racing games, and I hope I'm not overgeneralizing too much, is a really casual genre of games. It's really easy to just pick up and play and get into. Well, the great thing about the first-person shooter genre is its ability to appeal to both casual and hardcore gamers. You can have first-person shooters that are just easy to pick up and play, get right into the action, not too many challenges to overcome, but then you can have first-person shooters that act almost like a puzzle, a true skill-based endeavor where you have to become one with the controls and learn the ins and outs of the game in order to succeed and progress. The first-person shooter genre has such a wide range of skill gaps and skill diversity. Some first-person shooters are even able to appeal to both casual and hardcore gamers. And the genre is a perfect fit for both single-player and multiplayer, able to appease a wide variety of consumer wants. The gamers who want a casual single-player experience or casual multiplayer experience, and the gamers that want more hardcore skill-based single-player cross-player and multiplayer experiences. The first-person shooter genre just has that much flexibility. Again, I understand, as an outsider looking in, it may perhaps all look the same to you, but I promise you, actually playing these different variety of games in the first-person shooter genre is a whole other story, a whole other experience to just watching. And now, if you'll excuse me, to go on a little side tangent. While I have been praising the first-person shooter genre throughout this video, and I do love the genre, hell, my favorite video game of all time is a first-person shooter, I have to concede that there is an issue with the first-person shooter genre: oversaturation. There are so many first-person shooter video games out on the market, AAA, middle market, indie, and the spectrum of quality is all over the place. Deciphering the objectively good FPSs from the bad ones can be a bit of a challenge when there is such a huge quantity of content to sift through. So, I'm gonna do you a favor. Allow me to provide you with some personal first-person shooter video game recommendations for both the casual and hardcore gamer. So, first-person shooter video games I recommend: Doom 2016, Titanfall 2, Killing Floor 2, Tom Clancy's Rainbow Six Siege, Payday 2, Fear and its expansion Extraction Point, the latest Wolfenstein reboot series, Wolfenstein: The New Order, Wolfenstein: The Old Blood, and Wolfenstein 2: The New Colossus, the Crysis trilogy, Crysis, Crysis 2, and Crysis Free, Singularity, Bulletstorm, The Darkness 2, all of the Borderlands games, Borderlands, Borderlands 2, and Borderlands the pre-sequel. All of these first-person shooters that I've just listed off and recommended are some of my favorite first-person shooters and games that helped me fall in love with this genre, and I hope they can do the same for you. I do have two more last recommendations. Just be aware they have some huge fucking caveats. Those games being Destiny 2 and Overwatch. While I've personally had a lot of fun with these two first-person shooter video games, they've got some real shitty business practices attached to them, so maybe get these games on sale. Anyways, that has been my video on why I and many other gamers love the first-person shooter video game genre. I hope you enjoyed the video. If you did indeed like the video in any way, shape, or form, please be sure to hit the like button. Hit the like button too. Helps me, helps everybody involved in the video. If you hit the like button, please leave a comment in the comment section down below. Your thoughts, feelings, opinions on the topic of this video. I'd love to read your comments in the comment section below. We'll ever read comments near in the comments, please leave a comment. If you want to help out and support this video, then please share it on social media, Twitter and Facebook. And if you want to help out and support me directly, well, there's always Patreon. Anyways, guys, that's been a video, and I'll see you all later.